Greetings and welcome everyone to this morning's session, 11 a.m. session. My name is George and I'm the organizer for this session. This session will be about Amtrak and it's entitled The Future of the Amtrak Midwest Network and Chicago Hub. I'm super excited to have our guests here today. We have 4 panelists with 1 moderator, Martin Sandoval, Ben Dodson, Suzanne Mosher, and Joseph Shacter are the panelists, and Arun will be serving as today's moderator, all of whom are currently employed at Amtrak. The session is structured such that there will be 2 presentations during the top half with Q&A to follow, and the bottom half will follow the same format. So also at the end of the session, I would ask all of you here to take a minute or so to provide feedback of this session using the QR code that you can see on the screen now, and that same QR code will also be on the last slide of the presentation. I highly encourage you to do so. Your feedback does matter, and it helps Transport Chicago improve its conference year by year. Also, just as a little incentive, if you do answer the survey, we will be raffling off prizes during the happy hour. So if you are selected and you did complete the survey, there is a possibility that you could receive some kind of merchandise. So that's all for me. With that, Amtrak, the floor is yours. Let me just put up. I'll just put up the presentation here. You want it on slow? You know how to get the presentation mode over here. All right. Let's see. So you press that here. Yeah, you can press this. I think you got. Slideshow button up there. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Arun, Director of Network Development for Amtrak for the Central Region, and it is certainly a pleasure to be here with you today at Transport Chicago. A little bit about my role. I work with our new and future state partners on efforts to strengthen, enhance, and grow Amtrak's network. Right now, my team and I are advancing some exciting initiatives to bring Amtrak to new communities, like for example, working with states to bring to communities like Madison, Wisconsin, which is actually where I live. I'm the only one on this panel today that is not a Chicagoan, but I did have a great Chicago commute this morning. I stayed with a good friend on the Metro Electric line, took the Metro Electric line in the Millennium, took the L here. So such a fantastic transportation system and bones of a great transit system. So other things, other extensions such as extending, for example, the Michigan Wolverine service to Chicago, Detroit, across the border to Windsor to enable a connection, an interline connection with Via Rail Canada for service to Toronto. So that would bring a Chicago to Toronto connection. And so I'm going to introduce our panel here. On the panel with me is Martin Sandoval. Martin is Government and Community Affairs Manager for Amtrak's Midwest region, where he works with state and local officials to support legislative priorities for passenger rail services. He is a road warrior, spending most of his time visiting mayors, legislators, and other local stakeholders across the hundreds of Amtrak-served communities across the Midwest. And so he previously worked on local community engagement initiatives at Amtrak, and prior to that worked in government relations at Pace Suburban Bus. And we have Ben Dodson on my team. Ben is a project manager on Amtrak's network development team here in Chicago. He's overseeing the planning and implementation of new intercity passenger rail services in the Midwest and in the southern U.S. His recent work includes launching the Borealis service last year between Chicago, Milwaukee, through Wisconsin to St. Paul, as well as Amtrak's newest route, the Amtrak Mardi Gras service, which we're super excited about, from New Orleans to Mobile coming later this summer. And he's also leading long-term regional rail planning activities throughout the Midwest and right here in the Chicago core. And then we have Joe Shacter. Joe is Amtrak's Director of Program Management for the Chicago Hub Improvement Program, otherwise known as CHIP, overseeing a major infrastructure initiative to enhance Amtrak's operations in the Chicago area. In this role, he collaborates with our freight railroad partners and government stakeholders to advance major infrastructure projects in Chicago. Joe's previous work at Amtrak included managing the Chicago-based state-supported services with our Midwest state partners. Before joining Amtrak, Joe worked at the Illinois Department of Transportation as the Rail and Transit Division Director, overseeing the state's capital and operating funding for rail projects and transit services statewide. And we have Suzanne Mosher. Suzanne is the Senior Program Director in Amtrak's Capital Delivery Department, leading the over $3 billion Chicago Hub Improvement Program and managing teams, consultants, and stakeholder coordination for major infrastructure projects. Her current portfolio includes key upgrades at Chicago Union Station, which you're going to hear more about, such as platform reactivation, concourse improvements, and capacity expansions. She spent her career working on major initiatives through Chicago with the Public Building Commission of Chicago and the CTA, including planning the largest capital improvement project in CTA history, the Red and Purple Lines modernization program. So, so Amtrak has been an integral, yeah, I will, yeah. Just wait for it, man. Amtrak has been an integral part of the greater Chicago area's transportation. Well, actually, I'm going to do this now. Is this working? All right.
Okay.
Is that pointer? Okay, good.
This is the whole, this is back.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do it or?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. All right, so this is the panelists. Yes. Amtrak has been, before moving to the numbers, just a few remarks here. Amtrak's been an integral part of the greater Chicago area's transportation ecosystem since its inception in 1971, and we're committed to improving and expanding our presence here in Chicago into the future, and you're going to hear more about that from our panelists. Chicago is integral not only to the intercity passenger rail network in the Midwest, but for our national network. We heard a lot about Chicago being the hub of freight railroad activity. It's also the hub for Amtrak and for intercity passenger rail across the country. What we do in Chicago impacts communities across the network. Improvements that we do in Chicago, how we operate. It impacts travel times, reliability of our services, and also impacts the number of trains that we can operate on our existing routes and on new routes. Amtrak brings in millions of people into Chicago every year while meeting the intercity passenger rail needs of Chicagoans. Amtrak owns Chicago Union Station, which is, of course, is a key economic driver in downtown Chicago and a major station for Metro service. We have a strong partnership with Metro, who is our host, on many of our corridors. Who we share stations with and share passengers with, transferring between the two services. We also have, of course, the linkages with CTA bus and rail services at and near Union Station, and improvement of those linkages can only strengthen the overall transportation picture here in Chicago. Just a little bit more about Amtrak in Chicago to set the stage here for our panelists. Amtrak serves 3 million annual passengers here in Chicago. Chicago is our 4th busiest station in the U.S., and with 26 daily Amtrak departures. We have 1,550 employees based here in Chicago. Vast majority of those are non-management employees. And we have 2 equipment maintenance facilities here in the Chicago area. And 40 states are accessible with direct service right out of Union Station. Chicago is the central hub of Amtrak's national network, as I mentioned. We run a 24/7 operation in Chicago to deliver safe and reliable intercity transportation for Chicagoland's residents and visitors. Chicago's Union Station is also the busiest metro station in the system, with 6 services originating to destinations throughout the region. Amtrak works closely also with our host railroad partners, including Metra, BNSF, CN, CPKC, CSX, NS, UP, and others, to advance key infrastructure improvements like the CREATE program to bolster the Midwest rail network and our national network. So today's presentation, we're going to start off with an introduction to Amtrak. Marty Sandoval is going to be giving that, followed by a little closer look at Amtrak's Midwest network emanating out of our Chicago hub. And then we're going to talk about the Chicago Hub Improvement Program, the infrastructure components of that, and then also the Chicago Union Station improvements. So with that, I will now turn it over to Marty Sandoval, Government Affairs Manager for the Central Region, to give an introduction to Amtrak. Marty?
Thank you. Is it forward or up?
It is to the right.
To the right. Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for all being here with us today. Again, Martin Sandoval, Manager of Government Affairs from the Midwest region. I see a lot of my folks from my previous employer, Paceover and Bus. Thanks for being here, guys. You know, Amtrak, who we are. We are America's railroad. You know, who here has ridden Amtrak before? Raise your hands. Thank God. All right, good. So you all know who we are. You all been with us. Thank you for your, using us as a mode of transportation. We are, we connect 500 destinations across 46 states, even some provinces in Canada. Who didn't know that? Who's been to using Canada, our service? Anybody? All right, there you go, man. We don't even need to be here. We have a bunch of Amtrak fans here. We operate over 300 trains. We got 21,000 miles within, again, 30 host railroad partners. And that is a lot to deal with. And that is what makes Amtrak a little bit, unique in its way, because, we talk about intergovernmental partnerships, collaborations, but dealing with this many host railroads, it makes our jobs a lot of fun, right? And as mentioned, we are the 4th busiest station across the country, but we also, you could basically consider us, we are almost like the 6th largest domestic carrier in itself. O'Hare, Midway, but sometimes we forget we also have kind of Chicago Union Station. We are the central hub that connects from the west to the east and down south. I mean, we are a major component to the system that is known as Amtrak. So if you can't get to Chicago, you can't pretty much get anywhere else. So we are key when it comes to the major network. All right, no, that's not it. I think it might be easier doing it this way. There we go. All right, so history about Amtrak. We were created by Congress. We were, a hodgepodge, a combination of different railroad operators that were put together. It sounds like a lot of, transit agencies usually were made of different modes and different companies. Example, again, Paceover and Bus. They were also a combination of different bus entities back in the day. So, transportation is no different. But, back in 1971, a lot of them were going bankrupt. They were competing with, different modes of transportation, highways and airlines. So they decided to, put this group together and create and save the railroad network. Sometimes you have to really think about it when people are like, why aren't we like Asia? Why aren't we like Europe? But if you really think about it, we have more track mileage in this country than compared to other countries. So we are a major hub in the railroad network, and we're only getting started, and we're working our way to be the best. We are excited to, as we mentioned, we are progressing and moving forward to making new modes new routes established in the system, and it's thanks to partners such as other Department of Transportations like Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota. You know, we just had Borealis's 1-year anniversary. Thanks to the gentlemen behind us, Arun and Ben, they were leading the charge, and my colleague Derek James as well. He was also a major component to it. But you know, we've seen that thing just skyrocket. There's not enough seats right now to get, you know, people are fighting to get into this train connecting from the Twin Cities to Chicago. So, you know, again, how we replicate services such as the Borealis, and, you know, of course, you know, we need to get more equipment and such to make sure, because people want to ride with Amtrak, and clearly a lot of you utilize us. So we definitely want to make sure we meet that expectation. But you know, the majority of services that we provide, as you know, we are an operator. We provide, you know, maintain our fleet trains. We advertise, marketing. We supply food and beverage. Have any of you tried the cheese boards on our trains with the wine? Nobody? Oh man, there we go. I see you. Yeah, what? Perfect. You know, who needs to go to a vineyard when you get on Amtrak, right? But you know, we have a variety of modes of transportation. Again, from long distance, the state supported, the NEC, and we also have other bus routes as well. You know, for that first and last mile connection to some of our major hub stations. So we provide a variety of services in our network. But besides being an operator, and you know, we also are kind of like a construction company as well, because we're in the era of, you know, building new bridges or maintaining some of the old bridges. You know, we have a lot of bridges here in Chicago. Everywhere you go, there is a bridge, and guess what? They're all 100 years old. So they all need to be built and maintained and brought back to life. You know, we also you know, transmit our own electric power in the Northeast Corridor, where we own a lot of our trackage out there. It's interesting, you know, fact that, you know, I think a lot of times people forget here in the Midwest, we use a lot of a host railroads. And what that means, we use a lot of the trackage from our friends from CSX, CEN, CPKC, you name it, all the freights. They are the majority owners of the trackage in the Midwest. So we have to work with them as partners. And, you know, we are by federal mandate allowed to use those trackage, but you know, that is a little bit more different compared to the Northeast Corridor, like in Boston and New York. But you know, again, how we do and keep advance in the world. You know, we also, you know, build and maintain properties, real estate, so that we are more than just a rail provider. There's so much more behind the scenes, and you know, a lot of times when people are thinking of careers, think about Amtrak. There's a little bit of everybody for somebody. I see a lot of young faces, so keep that in mind. Check our website, amtrak.com, careers. But, you know, again, all jokes aside, there is an advantage. I think all of you know it as you've ridden on Amtrak. You know, downtown connections. We're safe, reliable. There's a lot of leisure. You get on your computer, you get a cheese board, you watch some videos, get a sleeper, take a night sleep, 8 hours. Next thing you know, you're in your next destination. You can't do that anywhere else. And you can also, you see the observation cars. It's such a magnificent view to see. All agree, right? You see some beautiful parts of the country that you will not see in the air. All you see is clouds. And here you get to see all kinds of lakes, rivers, wildlife, you name it. So it's a little bit less expensive as well. And of course, you get to bring 2 carry-on items, 2 check bags, and you can't do that on airplanes. So you tell me which airline does that. You can't. But this is our network. This is what we look like right now. I mentioned there's a variety of modes of transportation, long distance, state supported, the Northeast Corridor, and you see a lot of the yellow dots are our major hubs, stations along our network. And Chicago is one of the major important ones. I think you all agree to that part, right? Long distance routes that are over 750 miles. One of the examples are the Empire Builder, right? You go up to the North Dakota, all the way down to Portland, and then you get to Seattle. beautiful views. If you haven't done it, do it. Summertime's coming, go for it. Or winter, Glacier Park. You know, a little marketing advertisement right there. We also have our auto trains. You know, between I-95, you go. You know, you get your car on from Virginia to Florida and vice versa. So have you ever thought about that? We have 14 long distance routes coast to coast. Some of our, as I mentioned, routes like Borealis, Lincoln Service, those are state-supported services. Again, those are sponsored by the states of Department of Transportation. Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, you name it. Some of the major ones close by in the Midwest that are partners to making our service in the Midwest actually reliable, expanding. So, you know, again, on those services, we operate the trains, we provide the crew base, the equipment, the food, and all the fun. And of course, all the great customer service that we provide. We have average on 30 routes, soon 31. Is that accurate? All right, cool. Just make sure that's right. And then, of course, we got our Northeast corridor. As we mentioned, in the Midwest, we don't own a lot of trackage, but in the Northeast, majority of the trackage that it is owned by us. So we are pretty much the host railroad out there. You know, no one cares about the Northeast. We care more about the Midwest, so we'll go over this. But again, we have assets. We are the main operator in the Western Hemisphere that operates over 125 miles per hour. I know that's not 150. I know that's not 160. But we are getting there, people. So 125 is what we can do right now. You know, we maintain over 600 miles of railroad, as I mentioned, including in Michigan. We are soon to celebrate 100th birthday for Chicago Union Station this year. It's been a long time and still survive after the fire and rebuild. Quick question, when did Chicago Union Station get built? Any takers, questions? 1926? Anybody else? 1925, close enough. You get a prize, sir. But here you go. Again, all fun aside. And we're always trying to improve our investments, you know, the experience, the Wi-Fi, the technology, the communications, the safety signaling, all that fun stuff. And then that's all I got. And I'll pass it on to Ben Dodson.
I do want to emphasize one point that Marty made that I think is really important, and that is a cheese tray. It is a really good cheese tray. And I'm going to add that it's a Wisconsin cheese tray. But no, in all seriousness, you know, there's been so much good planning for Midwest Regional Rail Services, a huge body of planning work, but the proof is in the pudding. And that gets to the Borealis. You know, we have the Empire Builder, Chicago to Seattle, that goes along that route between Chicago and St. Paul. There's been years and years of planning on looking at, okay, what if we add a regional train service to that? You know, and we did the forecast, very strong ridership. But we put it out there, started service last year. We knew the ridership would be good, but we didn't, you know, we were surprised at the level of response to it and how fast it was. People just responded to it. Actual ridership has exceeded forecasts significantly. So it's just, the proof is in the pudding. You know, there's such pent-up demand here in the Midwest for more regional rail service. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben Dodson, he on my network development central team, to talk about continuing development of the Midwest Regional Rail Network. Ben.
Thank you, Arun. Good morning, everyone. As Arun said, my name is Ben Dodson. I'm a project manager here in Chicago, working on planning for all things Midwest and Chicago and the future of our network. I'm going to be providing an overview of our Midwest network and some of the exciting things we have on the horizon. So this is a map of our Midwest and mostly Chicago-based network. The routes in blue are those state-supported routes, and the routes in orange are our long-distance routes. As you can see, this really all relies on a strong hub in Chicago, and so I do want to take a moment to thank all of our transportation partners that provide the other layers of Chicagoland's transportation system. We can get everyone to Chicago, but our friends at CTA and PACE and Metra, at CDOT and IDOT help everyone get around and make Chicago such an engaging and exciting destination and a livable and workable community for the region. So we have 9 state-supported services in the Midwest region. 8 of those 9 are based here in Chicago. Again, I want to reiterate a key distinction Marty mentioned. The sort of definition of what's considered a state-supported route in policy is that it has to be under 750 miles and outside of the Northeast Corridor. So for all of these routes, the operating assistance, what isn't covered by ticket revenue, must come from the states. Amtrak is not allowed to operate its own routes and pay for them if they're under 750 miles. So all of these are made possible by our state partners. Two of these routes, as you see on the top left of the screen, are actually funded by more than one state, which adds an additional level of coordination and complexity, but also opportunity. And I'll talk a little bit more about our newest service, Borealis, which you see on the top left. The other half of our service in Chicago is long-distance services. These are trains that go 1 or even 2 nights and are defined statutorily as routes over 750 miles. Amtrak operates these routes at the direction of Congress and receives funding from Congress to direct these routes. I would recommend, if you haven't taken one of these long-distance routes, to do it. It's a beautiful way to see the country. The California Zephyr route, which leaves Chicago, you wake up in Denver, and then you spend the whole day going through the Rockies before going to sleep after Salt Lake City, is definitely our most beautiful route. I take the Floridian Lakeshore Limited trains to the East Coast a lot and would highly recommend. I think a common misconception I wanted to clarify on these routes as well is that a lot of people think that people are getting on the train from Chicago and going all the way to San Francisco, and there is a share of our passengers that do that, but really the role that these routes play in the national transportation network is to serve rural communities, especially those where this is the only transportation option. So the bulk of our ridership on these routes is actually communities maybe traveling between rural areas or from rural areas to urban areas where this may be the only transportation option for them. So I want to highlight one of our most exciting developments here in the Midwest in recent history is our Borealis route, which just celebrated its 1-year anniversary. We launched this route on May 21st, 2024, and got to ride the inaugural train, which is, as transportation planners know, it's always very fun to see something that has only existed on maps and spreadsheets and contracts as a real physical thing that you can touch and ride on. This is a second daily train that Amtrak operates between the Twin Cities, Milwaukee, and Chicago. It runs parallel with our long-distance Empire Builder service. So really, we're giving more options for our customers, increasing the availability of Amtrak in a lot of these communities by double. This service has been highly successful. This has totally blown out all of our expectations for ridership and revenue. There's clearly so much demand out there for more passenger rail service. And again, as I mentioned, it's not just the Borealis, but also our parallel Empire Builder service. And so we're really providing more options. So some, maybe on a round trip, they take Borealis one way and Empire Builder back the other way to really just give some more robust options. The part I'm most excited about with this route is it creates some new same-day connections that weren't possible before. The big story in Chicago is that a lot of passengers are coming from one side of the country to the other or switching between even regional services. And some of those connections were not possible with just the Empire Builder before, and some have actually been shortened by several hours. So for example, if you're going from Pennsylvania to Minnesota, that trip time was reduced by about 4 to 5 hours just due to a shorter layover in Chicago. This is, again, a state-supported route that's made possible with operating funding from the states of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Illinois. And this was a momentous occasion because this is the first state-supported route for Minnesota and the first new state partner we've brought on since the policy and this framework was put in place in 2009. And again, it's been highly successful. Talking a little bit about the equipment we use here in the Midwest. Most of our Midwest state-supported routes use some of the newest equipment in Amtrak's fleet, which is based on the Siemens Venture platform. So this is a great example of where the Midwest is helping sort of lead the country in using some of our newest fleet. We use this on select Chicago-based routes. Some of the advantages is that the train is 100% wheelchair accessible, so someone in a wheelchair can access every single part of the train. We have much larger windows. If you were familiar on our Horizon or Am fleet, where they've got sort of the tinier bay windows, these are big, large picture windows. You can see the beautiful scenery. And other enhanced amenities like USB charging ports, LED lighting, and our first onboard digital information screens. We are also in the process of procuring new long-distance equipment for our overnight routes, and that's going to offer a whole new class of greater experience and customer amenities for these services. So as far as efforts to improve travel time, we have 2 corridors in the Midwest that have hit a new top speed of 110 miles per hour. This includes on the Lincoln service, which operates between Chicago and St. Louis, And this was made possible with a partnership with our host railroad, Union Pacific, and the state sponsor of the service, IDOT. The key thing here is that on some of these frequencies, we were able to bring the travel time down to less than 5 hours, which makes it very competitive with driving and flying, and is obviously a much more comfortable downtown to downtown connection, as Marty said. The other area where we've made a lot of investment is the Michigan line. I'll just go back to the map for a moment to walk through this. So between sort of the Indiana-Michigan state line in Porter, Indiana, all the way to Dearborn, Michigan, that route is actually publicly owned. Half of it is owned by Amtrak, and the other half is owned by Michigan DOT. And so that's a rare example where we get to have a little bit more control of our fate and invest in the infrastructure. And we've built a really robust service profile in Michigan, where we have top speeds also up to 110 miles per hour. 110. And then let's talk about everyone's favorite topic, growth. So we are continuously making investments to reduce trip time and improve reliability, but also drive additional ridership. Growth is not just reaching new destinations, but providing more services and more frequencies on our existing corridors and extending them to new markets. All of our state partners, all the state partners that sponsor service currently in the Midwest are all advancing plans to add additional frequencies. Most of them are working on plans to double the amount of trains they currently have on each corridor and extend these routes to new destinations. And there are some additional new services, which are shown in the light blue lines on this map, that would bring more service to places like Indianapolis and also brand new destinations like Madison, Wisconsin. Now, just to clarify, most of our growth is going to be on these state-supported services that work within the Midwest region. All of that is most primarily being led by the states. So Amtrak is there to support as their operator and as infrastructure or host in a few select locations. But really, these are state-led initiatives that Amtrak is working on. So the current framework for how new and expanded and enhanced intercity passenger rail services are funded in the United States is under the Federal Railroad Administration's Corridor Identification and Development Program, or Corridor ID. And this is designed for both conventional and new high-speed rail corridors. There are 3 steps to this process that work through planning and design before final design and construction. Step 1 is scoping of a service development plan, which occurs in step 2. And then step 3 is the preliminary engineering and NEPA following that service development plan. Most of the corridors in the Midwest are currently in step 1, the scoping stage, and many are eagerly ready to start step 2 and actually begin their service development plans, some of which are going to focus on some nearer term improvements while also laying the foundation for longer term and a growth strategy for these corridors. Again, the Corridor ID sponsors, who are typically states, work with Amtrak, their host railroads, which are usually several, other carriers that also operate on these lines, all of the corridor communities, and the federal, state, and local governments to plan, design, and build these new and enhanced services. And everyone wants to know where the train's going next. This is the laundry list of all of the different Corridor ID efforts that are in the Midwest. As you can see, there are many, and then you can see in the second column for sponsor, most of these are state-led efforts, but there are a few led by municipalities or MPOs. I think the best advantage we have in the Midwest is that we're building on a really strong baseline network. When you look at the Midwest compared to other regions like the Mountain West and the Southwest, which have very little passenger rail today, it's going to be a much harder lift to get all of these trains running. But the fact that we can build off of a really strong network, adding additional frequencies, improving trip times and reliability, extending to new communities, that makes adding the new services even easier because there's already such a strong network to connect into. I do want to highlight one of these, which is the only Amtrak-led initiative on this list, which we call our Daily Cardinal Project. Of the 14 long-distance routes, 2 of them do not operate daily, including the Cardinal between Chicago, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, and the East Coast, and the Sunset Limited, which operates from New Orleans to Los Angeles. Amtrak is working on both of these routes to bring them up to a daily frequency so we can restore daily service to Indianapolis. And as I said, build on that effort, which is near term, with Indiana DOT's effort to add additional state-supported service so that we can have multiple frequencies a day to Indianapolis. And I'll turn it back over to Arun.
All right, thank you, Ben. And we'd like to have a brief Q&A for our panelists, Ben and Marty here. And I'll just kick it off, Ben, with a question. So you talked about growth and the strategy for growth and going through the FRA's corridor ID program, with the states. How, for thinking about the near and medium term, how do we get more funding for intercity passenger rail projects in the Midwest?
Sure. There are several programs out there, and through the Federal Railroad Administration that were passed under the bipartisan infrastructure law. But the key, there's a couple factors I think we can continue working on in the Midwest. Some of this funding is going to be a little bit leaner, as we're all seeing in the next couple years. But the key is not to wait until that funding is available and flowing again to start to make some of these decisions. So there's a lot of early planning work we can do now so that when the money begins to flow again, we can be ready and already have a plan that we can articulate and sell with policymakers and appropriators on all the exciting opportunities for improvement here in the Midwest.
Great, thanks, Ben. And I would like to open it up for any questions for our panelists.
Hi, I'm a student at the University of Illinois in Champaign. I used to be a regular rider on the Illini, the Saluki, also the city of New Orleans. But I've noticed that there's a lot of demand in travel from Champaign to Bloomington or to Lafayette, Indiana. I know there were discussions on a Quad Cities to Champaign, Danville corridor a couple of years ago. From your perspective, is there a growing interest or a feasibility in developing more cross-state or mid-sized city to mid-sized city routes in the Midwest beyond Chicago-centered service?
Yeah, I think there's a great deal of interest in that, and we're aware of that. And really, the FRA's corridor identification program is the tool where states or local communities could apply to get into that program to evaluate those particular corridors. They're not in some of those that you mentioned are not in the. We're not in the first round of the corridor identification program, but there will be future opportunities. But I'm going to turn it over to Ben to see if he has anything to add.
Yeah, I would also mention a great example of the type of corridor you're describing is our very successful Missouri River Runner service between Kansas City and St. Louis. One of the trains does run as a through-running train all the way to Chicago, but that service really exists just within the state of Missouri, and doesn't have any sort of major cities in the middle. It has the capital, which is quite small. But that's a highly successful service with really high ridership and revenue. It's in a deep red state, but still is very popular and is completely funded by the state of Missouri. And so I think that's a great example of where you can build out these services that are still tangentially connected to a larger network, but really can stand on their own in rural communities.
Thank you.
Sure. My name is Kevin. I work at the CTA. My question is this model of state-supported routes in the Midwest unique to the Midwest? And if so, what about Midwestern states or it makes it feasible here and not in other parts of the country?
Sure, great question. So under the what's called the Passenger Rail Improvement and Investment Act that was passed in 2009, I want to say, yeah. All routes, all intercity passenger rail corridors under 750 miles have to be supported by states or other eligible sponsors to contract with Amtrak for those services. Those sponsors provide the operating support for those services. Over 750 miles, that's our long distance network. That is funded through our annual appropriation from Congress. So there are, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, 19 different state agencies that sponsor state-supported routes throughout the country. So it's not just in the Midwest, it's all over the country. That's kind of the model. Would the panelists have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can start with that one. The Midwest definitely has the most robust network of state-supported services. That's really just because of so much advocacy and push at the state and local level, especially from all the station communities. I would say probably in history, the absence of maybe federal leadership in this area, the states and the region have really stepped up. Yesterday, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Compact, which is a group of all the state DOTs in the Midwest that have really been pushing and doing the planning sort of in the absence of federal leadership to push this and tell the story, which is not just a story of passenger rail benefiting Chicago or the Midwest, but really the whole country with how all of the freight is connected and how important Chicago is to the national rail network.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. That's a great point. Where we see the most success with these state-supported routes is where you have strong regional coalitions of states and other entities.
Just one more question.
Sure.
Jack Sullivan, CTA. So here's the question. I think it's going to lead to your question, sir. Boreas has exceeded your expectation. The Hiawatha continues to become the magnificent regional route. When should we expect more service? Question mark.
On the Hiawatha service? And the
Boreas and the Hiawatha.
Sure, yeah. So both of those corridors, again, are part of the FRA Corridor Identification Program, both sponsored and put in by the state of Wisconsin. But there was previous efforts ongoing to increase the Hiawatha service to up to 10 round trips daily. And the planning for that was already fairly advanced. And so I think that's something that is going to be going through this corridor ID process faster. A corridor ID process meaning finalize the service development plan, complete the environmental for any infrastructure improvements that are needed, which for that corridor are going to be mostly in Illinois. That's something that could happen in a 4-year time frame where we could get up to. But I will add, though, that we are poised to be able to increase frequencies on the Hiawatha service from 7 to 8 round trips daily, because we have met requirements, and the states have met requirements to implement that additional service through infrastructure projects in Wisconsin. And so next summer, probably around this time, that 8th round trip slot between Chicago and Milwaukee will hopefully be able to go into service, and that'll be a huge improvement there for the Hiawatha service. The second for the Borealis, I think in the near term, adding capacity, finding ways to add capacity to that existing round trip, but again, going through that corridor ID process. Is probably increasing service. There are still several years out for additional frequencies. Anything to add? Okay. All right.
So in the interest of time, we'll just have them save their questions until the second half
All
is
right.
finished.
Yeah, thank you. So great questions. Thank you for that. And we're going to shift gears here to the Chicago Hub Improvement Program. I'm turning it over to Joe Shacter to talk about the Chicago area infrastructure.
Thank you, Arun. Good morning, everybody. Let me just make sure we can, there we go. Chicago Hub Improvement Program. We are considering this truly a transformation of the Chicago passenger rail experience, because you've heard all about from our colleagues the growth that Amtrak wishes to achieve to serve our passengers, to serve our state partners and other stakeholders. To do that, we need to make sure that our service becomes, frankly, more reliable and can run hopefully more quickly. So the projects that I will be describing are those that are considered infrastructure improvements. They are the initial set. They are by no means exhaustive, but they are the cornerstones of what we think are needed to really get our service up to snuff here in the Midwest. So this map shows us the overall look of the CHIP program. You can see that it is, most of it, the vast majority, is in the Chicago area. 3 of the projects that Suzanne Mosher will describe are in the top box. Those are the Union Station projects. I'll be describing the other 3, meaning a replacement of the South Branch Bridge, which we'll look at in a moment, as well as improvements to our Chicago maintenance facilities. And then because Chicago truly is a hub of this regional system, we have a project in southwest Michigan, just over the border with Indiana, that is also part of CHIP It's a double track project that we'll discuss also. The benefits of CHIP on a pure numbers basis, just look at those jobs. Tens of thousands of jobs we believe will be resulting from these projects, both temporary construction jobs and permanent jobs from improved Amtrak facilities in the area. Economic value, more than $7 billion worth of economic growth that we think will be resulting from this program. As I mentioned, we within Amtrak itself and for all of you as passengers, reduced travel times, improved reliability. That's really what this program, what this CHIP program is all about. With that, customer experience almost by definition improves. It's remarkable. We have a measurement called the Customer Satisfaction Index, or CSI, and we've developed actually a separate measurement to show how the CSI jumps in what we call a blue sky environment. That means the train was on time and it got to where it was supposed to go when it was scheduled. Not surprisingly, that simple metric boosts CSI just incredibly. So that's what this program of CHIP is designed to improve. And of course, our number one priority always is safety. If we can get more cars off the road, more onto trains, it's safer for everybody. And it's also obviously easier on the road network around the states as well. So let's go into those three infrastructure components. The first I mentioned is this is the South Branch Bridge. For any of you who have taken Amtrak to Michigan, the East Coast, you have experienced the wonders of this 110-year-old structure. It is an engineering marvel of its time, a vertical lift bridge that operates more than any other bridge in the Chicago area. And there's a very simple reason for it, which I think you can see from that top picture. The distance from the water to the bottom of the bridge is only 10 feet. I have a college-age son who works the shoreline boats during the summer. He can stand up in his boat, put his hand up, and touch the bottom of that bridge when he goes under it. That's not a good thing, because what that means is that virtually any vessel that goes on the Chicago River underneath that bridge, the bridge has to go up to serve it. And maritime traffic has right of way. So 1,200 to 1,300 times per year, this 110-year-old bridge, owned by Amtrak, goes up and down for boats. That's not a sustainable thing. When we wish to run more service, we want to make our service better, so we don't want to get stuck up in the air here 1 mile from the station. And as such, because it is so old in the summer, when it goes up in the air in our hot, humid weather that we're about to start experiencing, it can expand slightly. And when that happens, the metal expands, and when it comes down, it doesn't seat. And when it doesn't seat, it's not safe to cross, and that holds up our schedule. It holds up 2 metro lines. It holds up Norfolk Southern and BNSF freight trains. It can result in a blockade of an interlocking just south of the bridge with the Canadian National, so it can mess up their service. It's time to do something about this bridge. So what we have in mind is a 2-bridge solution, whereby we would replace this bridge in kind, but it would only serve what's called non-revenue traffic. Freight service, freight trains would use it, as well as 1 metro line. The vast majority instead would use a 2-bridge, a second fixed high-level span that would start just south of Roosevelt Road, climb over 18th Street, fly over the river, fly over that 21st Street interlocking with Canadian National that I mentioned, and then touch down just north of the Dan Ryan Expressway. Where we are with this is we are close to completing with our consulting team at Gannett Fleming a feasibility study of that idea, of that 2-bridge solution, and we have an application in to move that into preliminary engineering and NEPA work, National Environmental Policy Act work, as a next stage. So this one, very exciting, very much of a foundation that will help all of our services, both existing and in the future. Same kind of logic here, new Chicago maintenance facilities. We are now maintaining almost 10 different types of equipment at our 14th Street shops that we inherited from other railroads decades ago, and that were never built, ever, to accommodate the kind of equipment we now have. Cars that have great electronic sophistication, technology that was never dreamed of even half a century ago, let alone a full century when most of these facilities were first built. So what we are looking to do is a two-stager here. We are working with the Union Pacific Railroad to acquire the former intermodal yard called Canal Street Yard, the south border of which you can see here is right opposite Sox Park. Northern half, it's really two trapezoids. The northern part begins just south of that 21st Street Bridge, so it is incredibly convenient to our existing yard facilities. So the plan is to acquire, use it for storage for the moment, and then over time, add a shop at that Canal Street facility while we reconfigure the 14th Street facility and end up with a maintenance campus that we think will be the envy of all and allow us to have greater mechanical reliability, particularly in the winter. And then finally, I mentioned this Michigan project. This is between the cities of Niles and then Glenwood Road, just northeast of Dowagiac, Michigan. This is a 20-mile stretch that, like so much of what we work on here in the Midwest, used to be double track. But in the days of freight railroads having issues before we owned this, and we own it now, we own this segment, the second track was removed. So it's single track. When it's single track, you can only put one train on there at a time, because if a train's coming the other way, that's bad. So what we want to do is put the second track back so that these trains can pass seamlessly, pass each other. We think this will be a significant reliability improvement for two of our three Michigan lines, both the Blue Water and the Wolverine service to Detroit. And it's part of a program that we are doing, as my colleagues have mentioned previously. This is one of the projects we're doing very much in partnership with the state of Michigan. Michigan DOT is being tremendously supportive, just like Illinois DOT is, of our projects here in the Chicago area. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Suzanne to walk us through CUS.
All right, thanks, Joe. So once again, I'm Suzanne Mosher. I am a Senior Director for the Chicago Hub Improvement Program, both sides, the infrastructure that Joe just described, as well as the Chicago Union Station components that I'm going to describe here today. So far we've been going kind of at a large overview of Amtrak. We've been kind of honing it in from a macro level. Now I'm going to kind of hone in on Chicago Union Station at a micro level, explain exactly what's happening here at the station. And as Marty mentioned, the station itself is 100 years old this year. And so keep an eye on LinkedIn and some other media outlets. We're going to be having a centennial celebration event on July 22nd at the station. So we hope that people can come and help us celebrate this huge milestone for the station. More to come on that. So as Joe mentioned too, all routes are leading to Chicago Union Station. We have to make sure that the station itself is ready to accommodate this increase in ridership growth. And so we have a series of projects here I'm going to briefly walk through as we wrap up our panel and explain what we're doing to ensure that our stations can accommodate the ridership from both Amtrak and Metra. And Amtrak owns Chicago Union Station, but Metra is by far the majority user at the station. Somewhere around 80–85% of the ridership is Metra riders. And so we have a unique combination of ridership users. We have the long-distance riders, we have our commuters, and we have to make sure that we're planning for that as we anticipate this ridership growth into the future. I'm going to run through 3 projects quickly to talk about what we've got going on. We have a variety of funding sources going into this, and it's such an interesting time to have the pleasure to work on this building. It's a Chicago landmark, a City of Chicago landmark, and so we're making sure that we are thinking forward and future-proofing all of our decisions so that our future generations have truly a gem to work with here. So first project is project number 1 in there. So north is to the left. And so we've got the Chicago River, and then Chicago Union Station right in the heart of it. So Chicago Union Station is a double stub-end station. We stub right into the main heart of the station, Chicago Union Station Concourse. But far to the east along the river, you see the long, what we call the mail platform. It's the high-level platform at CUS, 48 inches above top of rail, whereas every other platform at our station is only 8 inches above top of rail. So we are currently in GC procurement to bring on a general contractor to reactivate this project. It used to be used to deliver U.S. mail from train all the way up to the old post office above. And since the post office moved, several decades ago, it hasn't been used for ridership for revenue service. So we are reactivating that. I have a slide here in a moment to go into a little bit more detail. Project number 2 is the most customer-facing project we have in our portfolio. It is the improvements to the concourse. So when you come in, whether you're a Metro rider or an Amtrak rider, if you're not familiar with the station, it can be very confusing, as everyone knows. Wayfinding, signage, everyone's nodding their heads. And so we have a project currently in preliminary engineering to hopefully alleviate all of that. So another slide to come on that. And then lastly, our newest project in our station portfolio are the expansions of 4 of the primarily Metro-used commuter platforms, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 on the south, and 1, 3 on the north. But in conjunction with those platform improvements, we're also taking the opportunity to improve the ventilation at Chicago Union Station. And I know a lot of people are very aware of the situation we have. We operate on diesel, and when you sell off overbuilds, our predecessor railroads sold off the overbuilds. We have a major diesel situation, and we're working to alleviate that here. So very excited to get started on that project. All right, back to the mail platform. It was used for mail delivery, and now what we're going to do is we're going to convert it to passenger use. It is 48 inches above top of rail, so it'll be our first ADA-compliant level boarding platform at the station, a big victory for accessibility at CUS. And it'll reactivate edges 30 and 38, and also 3 stub tracks. We have 32, 34, 36 will be reactivated. And so obviously, in addition to the accessibility improvements, it'll add additional rail capacity and operational flexibility. And one of the most important components of this, too, is that once we get this platform up and running for revenue service, then we can go do the other platforms. We've got a capacity constraint here. We can't take more than 1 platform out of service at the same time. Our friends at CDOT right now have 2-4 out of service right now for their Canal Street viaduct replacement. So we can't do anything else on the other platforms until that's back in service. We don't have the additional capacity to do that. So this project is really exciting. One of the most exciting parts as well is that we received a federal discretionary grant award for this one. It's very close to being obligated, and if all goes well, we'll have notice to proceed to a general contractor in December. So really excited to start this one. Here's just a quick diagram of how passengers will be escorted out there. You might be aware of there's a distance from our main concourse area here. So this red route shows the route. Our passengers will be escorted out to the mail platform by Amtrak customer service agents. Because it's so far from our main concourse, we're also building a new passenger hold room. So when our customers get out onto the platform, they'll have a safe and comfortable passenger hold room to sit, full restrooms, vending. We'll even have an Amtrak Police Department satellite office to ensure safety and security for all our passengers. And one of the tricky parts about reactivating or doing any work in a station that's 100 years old is that we have to bring everything up to code compliance, modern codes. And the station that was built 100 years old did not, they designed in a different time. And so this platform is over 4 city blocks long, all under grade, under ownership of other people, private overbuilds above us. And so what we have to do to bring it up to NFPA 130 egress requirements is to add emergency-only egress stairwells from platform level up to street level. And some of our friends are shaking their heads because they very much know the challenge of doing this in older stations. And so we've been working very closely with the city of Chicago, the old post office, current ownership, 601 West, the United States Postal Service, and then also ComEd. So we have a variety of stakeholders. Took us almost 7 years to get our easements all executed for these emergency-only egress stairwells. So we just got those wrapped up last month. We're very excited. And then the second project, again, is the concourse improvement project. So we need to modernize it. It's confusing. There's walls that don't need to be where they are. There's offices that are old. There's a convenience store right smack dab in the concourse. So our goal is to remove all of those obstructions so that when passengers coming off of the south platforms look, they can see all the way to the north platforms and vice versa. So visitors coming in on a cross-country train, they can get their bearings. They can see, oh, this is where I need to go to the Great Hall. This is where I can go to get a bite to eat while I'm waiting for my connection. And so we are very excited to get started on this project. We do have a discretionary grant for a portion of final design, and we're just looking to modernize the station and make it a station of a world-class city such as Chicago. And then lastly, our newest project here is the widening of our commuter platforms. Again, they're owned by Amtrak, but they're primarily used for metro trains, including the most heaviest used BNSF travelers. And so we are just starting the preliminary engineering and NEPA phase. We have a discretionary grant award for that phase. We're very excited to get started on. The grant's been obligated, approved by Amtrak board. We're in the middle of procurement, and we hope to have a notice to proceed to our designer of record next month to get going on it. But in short, we'll be widening those platforms by taking out some of the unused baggage platforms. And so I think I have a slide here that'll show the baggage platforms. Yes, so if you look in that lower left-hand corner here, the station was originally built for all intercity passenger rail. And so these baggage platforms that are by metro platforms, they're not needed. We don't check bags for metro trains. And so by removing the baggage platforms, we're going to then widen the commuter platforms, and we'll realign the trains and adjust the interlocking so that our improved commuter platforms can then have stairs and escalators and even elevators directly up to street level. If you're familiar with Chicago Union Station, the south platforms, there's only one way in and one way out. In the event of a fire emergency, it's not a good situation. So we're working quickly to correct that. And so at the end of the day, we'll have wide commuter platforms. People can get off their train and go right up to street level at Canal Street. Not everyone has to go into the concourse. And then lastly, the ventilation part of this project is we'll solve that stagnant diesel that we often have at the station when our overbuilds turn off their exhaust fans. And so this system will allow Amtrak to control it. It'll be a fully Amtrak-controlled ventilation system, a mechanically ventilated system, pulling fresh air off of Canal Street, going from west to east, exhausting out towards the Chicago River, similar to some of the newer construction happening along the river. Very excited to get started on this much-needed project at the station. And then I think I can take this one too. If anyone's interested in learning more about these opportunities, procurement, whether you're a designer, an engineer, general contractor, Amtrak has a revamped Amtrak procurement portal. So yes, please take pictures and visit the site if you're looking to follow up on any opportunities for these exciting projects. I think this wraps up my portion.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. Super exciting, and this is really going to transform the passenger experience here in Chicago, and it's happening. These are funded. The steps of this are funded. They're going to require more grants, with the exception of the mail platform. They're going to require more grants to get done, to finish line, but they are happening and moving forward, so very exciting. I'm going to turn it right over to the audience now for questions.
Yeah. So we'll pick up where we left off.
Yeah.
I think, did you still have a question? No. Okay. Okay, go. Why don't we go in the back first? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Arnold. I'm a multimodal transportation planner. And I had a question about the equipment reliability. Over winters, Siemens being a single source provider of the power units and the venture coaches, those units have had some issues from what I understand. During cold weather, as well as the removal of the Horizon fleet from availability. What are some of the ways that Amtrak is looking to address reliability issues that have been arising over the past couple of years, and what is the strategy going forward for addressing that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. There are a number of initiatives that are going on with our mechanical department on looking at different ways and things we can do with the venture cars in terms of maintenance. There have been issues, but this also gets to the mechanical facility, and I'm going to turn it over to Joe Shacter to add.
Sure. Thank you, Arun. Good question back there. Arnold, I think your name was. Our yard maintenance project is designed to address really exactly what you're saying, and what we're trying to do with that is design it in a multi-phase manner so that even from the first phase, the presumed acquisition of the Canal Street Yard property will give us the additional space to move a number of components of maintenance that are currently, frankly, stuffed into corners and areas of our existing yard where we should be able to move trains for service, where we have employee parking that has been taken up, all of which really interferes with our ability to service these cars with Siemens quickly and as reliably as possible. So even upon the consummation of the acquisition with Union Pacific, we will be starting to use that new facility as a storage yard, which will provide some immediate relief. And then in the coming years, as Arun mentioned, as more funding comes in, we will be constructing new maintenance facilities, all covered, so that this equipment, as I mentioned, that has lots of electronic and technological sophistication, is kept warm when it is in for service and cleaning.
Yeah, and in the meantime, again, all processes are being reviewed and looked at, and developing new processes to help address those issues with that equipment. And let's see, other questions.
Hi, my name is Dawn Walter. I'm a transportation planner with WSP. About the ventilation system in Union Station. As someone with asthma, I'm very, very excited about that. But I was curious, since you're going to be drawing air from outside, and air quality sometimes is not the best, especially with wildfires in Canada and other places, what sort of filtration are you considering to make sure that the air quality is good at all times?
That's a good question. We're just about to start the design. The initial feasibility studies didn't get into that level of detail, but they will absolutely go into it, making sure that everything meets modern code and all the proper scrubbing equipment and all the filtration is up to snuff. And so TBD is the answer on that one, but we're excited to get started on it. As you know, it's a big problem.
Good morning, Dawn Kruger with Parsons. Appreciate the update. I'm curious what you can share about the status of the St. Charles Airline Bridge that's been discussed in recent years to help eliminate the time-consuming backup maneuver. I see that wasn't presented today, so.
It's a good question, and what you're referring to is a direct connection from our yard tracks that go through the 14th Street facility that we own and the St. Charles Airline Bridge over the Chicago River, which is owned by a consortium of railroads. Canadian National owns half of it, BNSF and Union Pacific each own a quarter of it. We have been in discussions with Canadian National about building the direct connection. Those negotiations to date have not resulted in an agreement to do that quite yet. However, we will be continuing to analyze that possible alternative along with a couple of other ideas that we have in case we can't come to agreement with the host railroads on the airline bridge. The airline bridge is now actually, for those of you who follow such things as those of us who are geeky do, the bridge is currently, seems to be in the first start of repair by CN. It had been out for about 3 years. And I have been delightfully watching it going up and down, which means that there's some work going on to get that thing going. And we're hearing that should be back in service sometime in 2026. And just as a quick aside, all of these route analyses, including the airline direct connection and other routes we will be studying, are one of the main purposes of that. I heard at least somebody say they're from the University of Illinois and they ride the Illini Saluki. Any of you who do that know you have this wonderful series of maneuvers that you have to live through coming in and out of the Chicago area. You back up here, you back up there, you think you're at the loop, then you're not, and we're going to fix all of that as part of this analysis. That's one of the prime goals of these alternatives that we're considering.
Certainly. Hi, Derek James with the Environmental Law and Policy Center. Ben, I think your name was. You mentioned projects around the Midwest. And then I think what was also mentioned was the number of state partners that Amtrak operates services with. Are there innovative things going on in other regions that could be replicated here in the U.S. that you, the Midwest team, might be looking at or considering?
Sure. So we are looking at other regions around the country where there has been, as I mentioned, additional planning and advanced planning work so that these folks are ready sort of when the golden opportunity arrives. So we've seen this work really successfully on the West Coast in the Bay Area with an initiative called Link 21, where BART, Capital Corridor, and Caltrans and Caltrain have all come together, and basically they evaluated all the things that each of those agencies independently want to do in the region and figured out what's the number one priority, which is a new Trans-Bay tube under the San Francisco Bay. And so that way, when they go to their legislators and go to the Hill and ask for funding for the West, for this region, they have one singular answer that everyone is singing, a new Trans-Bay tube, which will help all of those operators. We can't do anything alone here in the Midwest. Amtrak does not control the whole network. We are not the only rail user. We do not control all the stations. And so we've got to work with our partners. That additional regional collaboration, like Bill talked about with CREATE, and other initiatives we're helping to advance with our states and bringing in our freight railroad partners from the very beginning will help us tell a really solid story. I would say the other aspect that we are going to continue to work on in the Midwest is how we tell this story. The political environment will continue to change at the state and federal level, and we've got to be nimble and adapt to what story is going to resonate best with policymakers and appropriators. We've got a really good story to tell here. There's huge economic impact to Chicago, to Illinois, to the Midwest, and to the entire country, because how freight and passenger trains move in Chicago affects how freight and passenger trains move in New York and California.
Hi, my name is Jared Mitchell. I'm with HNTB. I'm curious, so the state of Illinois is currently doing a high-speed rail study, and how does this play into both Amtrak's plans and the Chicago Hub Improvement Plan?
Sure. So I'll take the first part of that about service. We have been working with the Illinois High-Speed Rail Commission as a project partner on that study. The real sort of key assumption into that study is that while there will be a high-speed rail route envisioned by the study, to really make that successful, it needs a sort of regional network to support it, because not every single destination that people need to get to will be on this route, and so it will require a good feeder network of conventional rail routes and other bus services. And so we're coordinating with them to ensure that our and IDOT's state plans for regional conventional rail routes will serve as a strong kind of base network to support the higher speed railroad network, which is what is so successful in the Northeast, where we have our higher speed Acela trains that are supplemented by additional connecting services. Some are state supported, some are long distance, and other conventional rail. As far as the other elements itself, we'll continue working with the High Speed Rail Commission as they further make progress on their alignment and how they'll get into Chicago.
And from the infrastructure point of view, what we're making sure of as we're looking at both infrastructure in the building and in Union Station, and outside, is to make sure that we're not doing anything that would preclude high-speed rail of moving forward with it. Clearly, building new high-speed rail from scratch, greenfield as it's called, is exceedingly expensive. So at some point, whatever would result in that, if it does at some point, would need to interface with the existing network in some way. So what we want to make sure of is, as we're doing these infrastructure improvements, that we don't preclude electrification in the future or other elements that would be needed for true high-speed rail.
Hi, my name is Galina, and I'm with Kimberly Horn. I have a question about some of your future growth stations, specifically about Moline, Quad Cities, Illinois, which is where I'm from, which has been in talks for probably most of my life. And in 2016, the city of Moline built like an intermodal hub to welcome Amtrak in. And from what I understand, there's just been problems with acquiring the track to go from Princeton to Moline. So I'm wondering, what are some of the main barriers that you face when like seeking out new stations? And also, is the train coming to Moline?
Yeah, I can start that. So, yeah, it's been a journey for the state of Illinois and to get that going. That railroad, the second part of that corridor that's closer to Moline is that is owned by a short line railroad, and so that ownership will continue to be with the host railroads, and Amtrak would be just a passenger service on those host railroads, and it's taken a while, I think, to come to agreement on the infrastructure improvements needed to operate on those railroads. And the state is now going through it's now in the FRA's corridor identification process, and it is moving forward through that process. So it is moving forward. Ben, do you have anything to add?
I was just going to add, it does illustrate an interesting dynamic that has been successful in other regions of local communities, taking a chunk of the whole project to advance what they can control. And in this case, the city of Moline was very expeditious in advancing their work, but where we see this a lot across the country in places like Madison too, where the local communities are taking the leadership on the station piece, and then the state or Amtrak or the host railroad can continue to work on the corridor, and that can help keep things moving forward.
Okay, so we have time for 2 more questions.
Hello, my name is Brandon. I work with the county. After hearing about the CREATE program and then some of the infrastructure improvements mentioned today, I was wondering what other potential for like speed increasements there are. Is it schedules, equipment, things like that that can make rail more competitive than driving for some of these state-supported routes?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's kind of the key is being competitive with driving. A lot of times it's about going slow less, and it's average speeds. It's more than the maximum speed that you can go, and so we want to get those average speeds up so that all of those corridors become more competitive with driving. The other aspect, I think, and to do that, to get those average speeds up, there are a number of improvements underway through the states, through the Corridor ID program, and through other grant programs that are going to help do that. There's a number of projects in Michigan, which Joe alluded to some of those. Those are going to lead to reduced trip times. And the other thing we also think about too is, when we're on corridors where, we are, comparable to the auto, maybe a little bit longer than the auto, is, productive time. There's travel time, there's also productive time. When you're on the train, it's not lost time, it's your time. And we are, we're promoting that too. But again, the goal, to increase the average speeds, get competitive with auto travel times, and it's these infrastructure projects and working with the host railroads on schedule adjustments, et cetera, that are going to drive those improved trip times across the network. But that is something that the states and Amtrak are working together on. Anything to add?
I would also just comment that, working with the host railroads is a major key factor, right? Because the majority, again, we mentioned in the Midwest, we don't own much of the trackage. So grade crossings are going to be a crucial thing, right, in order for us to increase speeds. So when we have to go, I was just in Michigan, we were doing legislation outreach to make sure that funding for grade crossings continue supporting the freight railroads. There's funding for that. So that way, later on in the future, when we do come along the route for the ride, we could increase those speeds. So again, it's all that intergovernmental partnership with our host railroads and the DOTs and the states.
Yeah, and we're, the host railroads have little spots on their corridors, for example, where there's slow orders, or, our standard speed is, across the network is 79. We have a couple of corridors where we go 110, but 79 majority. There's, several corridors have areas where, you have to slow down to 60 for a couple of miles or even lower. And so working with the states and the host railroads and getting funding to address those areas can really drive down the trip times.
Okay. Yep. We're a little bit past time, but last question.
Yeah, my name is Victor. I'm with HDR. And to tag along with that, you've mentioned some successes with the host railroads, Borealis and others, and some challenges with the St. Charles Airline. So what would you say are some of the lessons learned or best practices you would have for negotiating and working with the host railroads for future opportunities?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest lesson learned, so I started in this role about 2 years ago here in Chicago, and we've engaging our freight partners in a couple different planning initiatives. And the key thing that we hear from them and where we've had the most success is if we bring them in at the very beginning. There have been past mistakes by Amtrak and others where stakeholders have not been involved in the process. Worst case scenario, they find out about some planning study once it gets published in the news, and they were not consulted. And of course, those projects didn't go anywhere because of that. So what we've learned is we need to get all the stakeholders, no matter how hard that may be, involved in the process at the very beginning, and they are so much more receptive to the ideas if we can help collaborate them, and we get better projects as a result of it. We don't operate freight traffic. We used to carry mail a long time ago, but we don't do that anymore. And so we need their perspective on what their operation looks like. And my eyes have certainly been enlightened at problems that I'd looked at it from an Amtrak perspective, but then could put myself in the freight stakeholders and had them show me sort of why there might be a better solution there.
Like just what he said.
Well, I think that closes out our time slot here. I want to thank the panelists for great presentations, and thank all of you for being here, and for the great questions. Again, it's really a pleasure for Amtrak to be here and be part of the Transport Chicago, and thank you very much.